EDL 851 Case Study: Evaluate, develop, and implement systems of supervision, support, and evaluation designed to promote school improvement and student success. In this case study, the principal has decided to non-renew a teacher after his observations and evaluations for the school year. The teacher did not accept this non-renewal and stated she did not receive support and help from the principal in order to make improvements. Mrs. Stevens is the teacher that is non-renewed, and she felt unsupported. The principal visited the room several times and did not feel the student engagement was sufficient. He felt the teacher was not willing to improve or take his suggestions. He non-renewed her. This non-renewal has not made it to the Board of Education or to the superintendent yet, so there's still room to change that decision. No harm has come to anyone in these interactions other than Mrs. Stevens emotionally is at distress and the principal is unsettled. There's no law being broken. However, Mrs. Stevens could go through NEA to dispute the non-renewal recommendation from her administrator, but being that she is not tenured yet, there shouldn't have to be a reason to non-renew her. Observation and evaluation procedures vary greatly state to state, but there were some things the principal could have done to help this process be more equitable and more supportive. The principal's evaluation process seems to need more structure and training on providing useful feedback. The dialogue with Mrs. Stevens needed to be ongoing and frequent throughout the year to validate this non-renewal recommendation. The principal visited Mrs. Stevens' room several times and was unhappy with the student engagement levels, and when he walked by the room, there's a high level of volume and student discussion seemed unstructured. He has decided to non-renew her. Interactions between the teacher and principal have seemed strained. Mrs. Stevens was defensive when the principal provided feedback, and she felt unsupported that his feedback was not helpful. She intends to fight the non-renewal recommendation. The decision does not currently involve stakeholders, but if Mrs. Stevens does not improve, it could impact building culture that she could be tenured if she is renewed and not be effective in the classroom. It will impact students, so parents eventually may become involved over time. Involving more observers from the administration team, supporting Mrs. Stevens with peer feedback, and using video to help Mrs. Stevens see her own instruction could all have provided more support than the principal has already tried to do. So there are a few things I am unsure of: how many times observations were done, what time span they were done over, what support and feedback were provided to help Mrs. Stevens, and if any other methods were used to support her. So these would be my options. First, I could continue with the non-renewal and document observations. Proceed with communication to the superintendent. Second, renew the teacher and see if she improves. Third, renew the teacher and provide a plan for improvement, setting goals with the teacher and holding regular meetings and observations. If I continue with the non-renewal, the teacher will move on and not continue to be a concern in the upcoming year. Another district, however, will hire her and she will not have had any improvements. If I renew the teacher and see if she improves on her own, the teacher might feel like she got a second chance, but the teacher will not have improved or see a reason to improve possibly. If option 3, I renew and create a plan for improvement with the teacher will have a second opportunity and be given voice in what and how she might work towards improvement. The teacher might still continue then to be defensive and disengage in efforts to improve. Option 4 is option 3 plus restructure the observation process within the building. A pro would be that this would build more equity and balance in the observation process and be sure to provide teachers with beneficial feedback across the board. A con, it might not help the teacher now, but would be helpful for future teachers. So I would choose option 3 and 4 as my best options. I would renew the teacher based on goals that we set together and build a plan of improvement with student achievement and engagement data as measurements that she would work towards in the upcoming year. By involving the teacher in this discussion and providing options for direction of focus, she would feel more included. The student achievement data would serve as our objective feedback and measurement of growth. The only struggle here would be that I would also need to mend the relationship that is broken between the principal and this teacher. So I would have to make sure that I go about this in a proper way to help ease over the conversations that have happened prior to move forward in the best way. As I look at the process of evaluation and observation, a few improvements can be made for moving forward. I would like to schedule as an administration team frequent observations that overlap so we're all providing teachers with feedback and collecting data. We would calibrate our expectations and define what we're looking for in our staff instruction. And feedback would be specific and useful and followed by dialogue with the teacher post-observation as often as possible. The very first thing I would do to implement my plan is I would revamp our evaluation form to include instructional skills. Evaluating someone's personality seems subjective. However, looking to see if these instructional objectives are clear to all involved is more objective. Simply just observing the relationship someone has with students, parents, fellow teachers, and administrators, in some cases, is not observable in a class period, but also is subjective. To look at specific instructional qualities, such as cooperative learning, feedback to students, scaffolding of content, differentiation, physical engagement, social engagement, and critical thinking, are all strategies and skills that are based on researched, effective methods by Hattie and Marzano. These would be things that would be more objective and things that teachers could strive towards. The second thing I would do is then ask to meet with Mrs. Stevens again to consider a plan of improvement for the upcoming year. I would apologize for how our previous meeting went and commit to improving on how I support teachers as a whole. I would then introduce our new observation form and ask for her feedback. When we discuss how she could improve on her plan of improvement moving into the upcoming year, I would present these 3 areas for Mrs. Stevens to select for one focus. I would ask her to consider student engagement, student discussion techniques, or student collaboration, selecting only one of these as her focus. All of these would meet my intention to increase student engagement in order to help her with the classroom management and active learning. We know when students are actively engaged in their learning, they tend to behave better. We would use a combination of video reflection, administrative support with 2 different principals observing at different times, and have her observe effective teachers within our own building. Next, I would meet with my administrative team. We would create a schedule of all the teachers in our building to observe, not just the ones on evaluation, and we would be sure that our observations overlapped so that every teacher had at least 2 different administrators giving feedback. We would use a building Google form that would collect data on our new instructional skills, and we would leave a note of support and feedback each time we visited a classroom that was handwritten. Classroom visits would serve as formative support for all staff. After that process, teachers needing support after the first quarter would be assigned to 2 administrators and meet regularly with them to start working on a common goal.